The great hall was a suffocating mix of crisp pine and winter air, but beneath the seasonal freshness lurked a more primal scent, the heavy, intoxicating musk of alphas gathering for the seasonal claiming. My skin crawled as I pressed my back against the frozen stone wall, praying to become invisible among the line of omegas brought here as sacrificial offerings. Unlike the others, whose skin was slicked with expensive perfumes and whose eyes were trained in the art of the demure glance, I was a jagged piece of glass in a room full of polished silk. My pale blonde hair fell in wild, unadorned waves, lacking the intricate braids that signaled a life of proper grooming. "Stand straight, girl," the handler hissed, her nails digging like talons into my shoulder. "The Alpha King himself is watching. Show some respect." I bit my cheek until the copper tang of blood filled my mouth. Respect was a luxury for those who weren't being bartered like livestock to appease the powerful. Only 3 days ago, I had been a free woman gathering herbs in the forest. Then, the village elders arrived at my cottage with a grim ultimatum: my life in exchange for our town's safety. Hidden beneath the thin, flimsy ceremonial dress they had forced upon me, my grandmother's silver pendant felt like a lead weight against my chest. "Remember, Arya," she had whispered on her deathbed, "your heart is the one thing they cannot take unless you surrender it." I gripped the engraving of the wolf and the moon, a forbidden relic of the old ways, from a time before omegas were used as currency. Suddenly, the massive oak doors thundered open. The room plunged into a suffocating silence. Even the air seemed to freeze. King Caden entered. He was flanked by warriors whose bodies were maps of scars and conquest, but it was the king who commanded the oxygen in the room. He moved with the lethal, deliberate grace of a predator. Despite the roaring hearths, he wore a mantle of dark fur across his broad shoulders. His expression was a mask of cold granite as he scanned the room, until his gaze hit the line of omegas. Something flickered in his eyes, a spark that made my heart hammer against my ribs. "That one," he commanded, his voice slicing through the stillness like a blade. "The pale one with the untamed hair." Every head snapped toward me. The handler's grip tightened painfully, her shock radiating through her fingers. I couldn't breathe. This was a nightmare. I was supposed to be the token offering, the girl from the poor village intended to be overlooked so I could return to my life. But the Alpha King had looked at me. And he hadn't looked away. They marched me toward his private chambers like a lamb to the slaughter. 2 guards shadowed my every step through a labyrinth of stone corridors and ancient tapestries. King Caden had vanished the moment he made his choice, leaving a wake of gasps and scandalized whispers behind him. I had been chosen over noble daughters and trained concubines. "Don't even think about running," one guard muttered, his voice surprisingly tinged with pity. "The king doesn't tolerate disobedience." The other guard let out a harsh snort. "As if she'd get far. No one leaves these walls unless King Caden wills it." Caden. Even the sound of his name felt like a brand on my skin. We stopped before a towering door, intricately carved with wolves hunting beneath a silver moon. As the heavy wood groaned open, my grandmother's old-world stories rushed back to me, more vivid and more terrifying than ever before. Tales of alphas who transformed under moonlight, becoming the beasts whose spirits they carried. Tales I had dismissed as the fanciful imaginings of an old woman trying to make sense of a cruel world. "Wait here," the first guard instructed, knocking firmly on the door before both men retreated down the corridor, leaving me alone. My fingers found my grandmother's pendant, clutching it through the fabric of my dress. If I ran now, would I make it even to the end of this corridor before being captured? And what would happen to my village when the Alpha King's rage descended upon them for my disobedience? The door swung open, and heat billowed out from within. Not the comfortable warmth of a home hearth, but the oppressive heat of a forge, the kind that remakes metal into weapons. "Enter!" His voice carried no emotion, yet commanded absolute obedience. My legs moved of their own accord, carrying me into a chamber larger than my entire cottage. Furs covered the stone floor, and a massive bed dominated one wall. Its posts carved from whole tree trunks, still bearing their bark. A fire roared in a hearth big enough to roast a deer, casting dancing shadows across walls adorned with weapons and maps. The Alpha King, Caden, stood by a table laden with fruits, meats, and wine. He had removed his ceremonial furs, revealing broad shoulders beneath a simple linen shirt. Without the formal trappings, he looked younger, though no less dangerous. "You haven't been prepared properly," he observed, eyes narrowing as he took in my appearance. "Which village sent you?" "Riverist," I answered, surprised to find my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "We had little warning of the tribute requirements." His laugh was sharp and without humor. "Tribute? Is that what they told you this was? He moved toward me and it took every ounce of courage not to step back. What's your name, Omega? Arya. Arya, he repeated as though tasting the sound of it. Do you know why you're here? Arya of Rivermist. I lifted my chin slightly because our council traded me for protection. And do you know what happens to Omegas chosen at the seasonal claiming? The stories were well known, passed in whispers between women in my village. Omegas chosen by alphas became their property to use, to breed, to discard when they grew tired of them. Some were treated well, adorned with jewels and fine clothes as prized possessions. Others were never seen again. I know enough, I replied, fighting to keep my voice from trembling. Cadence circled me slowly, his gaze of physical weight against my skin. I wonder if you do. He stopped before me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. The council of elders from your village sent a letter with their offering. Do you know what it said? I shook my head, confusion momentarily overshadowing fear. It said their tribute was defective. That you carry a sickness of the mind that makes you unsuitable. His eyes bore into mine, searching. They claimed you see visions. That you speak with spirits no one else can perceive. The blood drained from my face. The sickness had been my deepest secret, shared only with my grandmother, who had the same gift. After her death, I had grown careless. Perhaps speaking to the woodland spirits where others might overhear, drawing symbols in the dirt to appease the ancient ones who guarded our forests. They sent you expecting you to fail. Caden continued, his voice lower now. To be rejected and returned in shame, fulfilling their obligation without losing anyone they deemed valuable. Humiliation burned through me, followed quickly by anger. The council had never approved of me, the strange orphan girl who lived at the edge of the village. But to send me as an intentional insult to the Alpha King. I didn't ask to be here, I said, a tremor finally breaking through my composure. Send me back or keep me or kill me, whatever punishment fits their insult. Something flashed in his eyes, surprised perhaps that I would speak to him so directly. Alphas were accustomed to Omegas who cowered and submitted. Not those who met their gaze and spoke plainly. There will be no punishment, he said after a moment. Not for you, at least. As for your village. His smile was all predator. We shall see. He turned away, moving to pour wine into 2 goblets. I have a proposition for you, Arya of Rivermist. A chance to secure both your freedom and your village's safety. My heart skipped. What kind of proposition? Spend the night in my bed, he said simply, extending a goblet toward me. If you endure until dawn without fleeing, I'll set you free. No claiming, no binding. You may return to your village, and I'll ensure they remain under my protection despite their discourtesy. I stared at him, waiting for the trap to reveal itself. Just sleep beside you, that's all. His laugh was genuine this time, deep and startling in its warmth. No, little Omega, not just sleep. Heat flooded my cheeks as understanding dawned. And if I refuse, then you return to River Mist immediately, but my protection is withdrawn. I imagine there are other kingdoms whose alphas would be happy to claim your territory. The choice was no choice at all. My village, for all its faults, was home to children, elders, and innocents who had no part in the council's decision. Without the Alpha King's protection, they would be vulnerable to raiders and rival packs whose treatment would make Caden seem merciful by comparison. One night, I repeated carefully, and then I'm free. No claiming bite, no binding ceremony. He nodded once, his expression unreadable. One night, your courage for your freedom. I reached for the goblet he still held extended, our fingers brushing as I took it. A jolt of something electric passed between us, making my breath catch. His nostrils flared slightly, and I wondered if he could smell the fear. And something else, something I refused to acknowledge on my skin. What happens now? I asked, taking a small sip of wine to steady myself. Cadence's eyes darkened as he watched my lips touch the rim of the goblet. Now we wait for nightfall. And then, Arya of River Mist, we discover what you're truly made of. Outside the chamber window, the sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in violent strokes of crimson and gold. In just a few hours, I would either secure my freedom or lose it forever in the bed of the Alpha King. A man who had chosen me for reasons I couldn't begin to understand, but whose gaze held secrets as dark and deep as the approaching night. I paced the chamber as Caden watched from a chair by the fire. His presence filling the room even in silence. Each time I completed a circuit, I felt his eyes tracking me, studying my movements with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Are you planning an escape route?" he asked finally, amusement coloring his tone. "The windows are too high. The door will be guarded and I'm faster than you." I paused by the window, gazing out at the darkening sky. "I'm not planning an escape," I agreed to your terms. "Yet you move like a caged animal." "Perhaps because I am one," I replied, turning to face him. The wine had loosened my tongue, making me bolder than wisdom allowed. To my surprise, he didn't appear angry at my insolence. Instead, he leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his gaze sharpening. "Tell me about these visions of yours." My hand instinctively went to my grandmother's pendant. "They're nothing. Village superstition. Lie to me again, Arya, and our agreement is void." The threat hung between us, and I swallowed hard. No one had ever asked directly about what I saw. They only whispered behind their hands, called me cursed, kept their children away from the strange girl who spoke to empty air. "I see echoes," I said carefully. "Sometimes of what was, sometimes of what might be. And sometimes," I hesitated, knowing how mad it would sound. "Go on," he prompted, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "Sometimes I see beings that others don't. Spirits that dwell in the forests, the rivers, the stones." I waited for the dismissive laugh, the accusations of lies or madness. Instead, Caden rose from his chair and approached me slowly, as one might approach a wild thing, ready to bolt. "What do they look like, these spirits?" The question was so unexpected that I answered without thinking. "Like shadow and light woven together, like wind given form, they speak without words and move between spaces that shouldn't exist." He stood before me now, close enough that I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. "And what do they tell you, these wordless spirits?" "Warnings mostly, we're not to walk in the forest, which plants will heal and which will poison." I took a steadying breath. 3 days ago, they warned me about men coming to my door. I ignored them. Something shifted in his expression. A recognition perhaps or understanding. "Your grandmother had the same gift." It wasn't a question, but I nodded. "How did you know?" "The pendant you keep touching," he said, his gaze dropping to where my hand still clutched the silver wolf and moon through my dress. "May I see it?" Reluctantly, I pulled the chain over my head and held it out to him, the silver catching the firelight. He didn't take it from me, only leaned closer to examine the engravings. "Moon speakers," he murmured. "I thought they had all died out generations ago." "Moon speakers," Caden straightened, his expression guarded once more. "An old bloodline rare among Omegas. There was a time when they were revered, not reviled." He gestured for me to put the pendant back on. "Your council knows nothing of what they've sent me." Before I could ask what he meant, a knock sounded at the door. Caden moved away from me, calling permission to enter. A young woman appeared, carrying a tray laden with more food and a steaming pitcher that filled the room with the scent of spiced cider. "Your bath is prepared in the adjoining chamber, my king," she said, keeping her eyes downcast. "And for the Omega as well, if she wishes." "Thank you, Mara," Caden replied. When the door closed behind her, he turned to me. "You should eat, then bathe. Night approaches." The reminder of what awaited me sent a fresh wave of anxiety through my body. I moved to the table, more to have something to do than from actual hunger. As I selected a piece of bread, I noticed Caden watching me with an odd expression. "What?" I asked, suddenly self-conscious. Most Omegas brought here refuse food either from fear or from years of training to maintain the slender figures alphas supposedly prefer. He gestured to the spread before us. "Eat what you wish. You'll need your strength." The implication made heat rise to my cheeks, but I forced myself to eat methodically, knowing he was right. Whatever the night held, facing it with an empty stomach would only make it worse. When I had eaten my fill, Caden led me to a door I hadn't noticed before, opening it to reveal a smaller chamber lit by oil lamps. Steam rose from a copper tub large enough for two. The water's surface scattered with flower petals whose fragrance hung heavy in the air. "Take your time," he said, stepping back. "I'll bathe after you." I stood awkwardly, suddenly aware of how filthy I must appear to him. My hair tangled from the journey, my skin still bearing traces of forest soil beneath the ceremonial dress. "Will you?" I gestured vaguely, unable to voice the question, understanding flickered in his eyes. "I'll wait in the other room." Call when you're finished. He closed the door, leaving me alone with my thundering heart. I undressed quickly, setting my grandmother's pendant carefully on a small table beside the tub. The water was perfectly heated, and I sank into it with a sigh that was almost a sob. For a moment, I allowed myself to simply exist in the warmth, to pretend I was somewhere else, anywhere else. Reality intruded soon enough. As I washed, scrubbing away dirt and fear with soap that smelled of lavender and rosemary, I contemplated what lay ahead. One night in the Alpha King's bed. One night to endure whatever he demanded. And then freedom. I could do this. I had endured worse. The winter my parents died, leaving me alone at 12. The whispers and isolation as my strangeness became apparent. The hunger when villagers refused to trade with the cursed girl. I could endure one night with a man, even one as intimidating as Caden. When I finally emerged from the water, I found a soft drying cloth and a robe of deep blue laid out for me. No ceremonial dress, no omega garb designed to display submission, just a simple robe that covered me from neck to ankle. I dried my long blonde hair as best I could, combing through the tangles with my fingers, then donned the robe and secured my pendant around my neck once more. "I'm finished," I called, my voice sounding small in the steamy chamber. The door opened immediately as though he'd been waiting just outside. Caden entered, his gaze sweeping over me in a way that made me acutely aware of how the damp robe clung to certain curves. "Your turn," I said, moving to pass him. His hand caught my arm, gentle but firm. "Wait!" I froze, my pulse jumping beneath his touch. He was close enough that I could smell him. Pine and smoke and something wild that defied description. My omega instincts, dormant until now, stirred to life in response to his proximity, urging submission, urging me to bare my neck to this alpha who radiated power. I resisted, meeting his gaze steadily, despite the trembling in my limbs. "There's something you should understand before night falls completely," he said, his voice low. "I chose you for a reason, Arya of Riverist. Because I'm a moon speaker, I guessed." The unfamiliar term still strange on my tongue, his lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "That's part of it, but there's more." He released my arm, his fingers trailing lightly over my skin as he did. "When I entered that hall tonight, I scented something I've been searching for my entire reign, something I'd begun to believe was merely legend." A chill ran down my spine despite the room's warmth. "What did you scent?" "My fated mate." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Fated mates were the stuff of old tales, an alpha and omega destined for each other, bound by forces beyond comprehension. Most dismissed such stories as romantic nonsense, a way to make arranged pairings more palatable. I took a step back. "That's impossible. Fated mates don't exist, don't they?" Caden challenged, his eyes gleaming with something primal. "Then why did every alpha in that hall grow tense when you entered? Why did I know exactly where you stood before I even saw you? Why does your scent call to me like nothing I've ever encountered?" "If that were true," I countered, "why offer me freedom? Why not simply claim me?" His expression darkened. "Because a true mate cannot be taken, only given freely. And you, little Omega, are as wild and untamed as the spirits you commune with." He stepped closer again, and this time I held my ground. "I want your surrender, Arya, but I want it given, not taken. So, this night is a test," I said, understanding dawning. "To see if I'll submit willingly, this night is an opportunity," he corrected, "for both of us to discover what lies between us. If you feel nothing by dawn, you're free to leave as promised. But if you feel even a fraction of what I sensed in that hall," he left the implication hanging. I lifted my chin. "And if I walk away regardless," something dangerous flashed in his eyes. "Then I'll let you go as promised. But know this, moon speaker. What exists between true mates doesn't fade with distance. It grows more painful, more demanding until it consumes you from within." Is that a threat? It's a warning from one who has witnessed it firsthand. He stepped away, creating space between us. "I'll bathe now. Wait for me by the fire." As the door closed behind him, I leaned against the wall, legs suddenly weak. Fated mate. The concept was terrifying. Not because I didn't believe, but because deep down I feared he might be right. The jolt I'd felt when our hands touched. The awareness that hummed beneath my skin in his presence. The way my body responded to his scent despite my mind's resistance. These weren't normal reactions. I returned to the main chamber and stood before the fire, watching flames dance and trying to quiet my racing thoughts. Outside, night had fallen completely. The sky a canvas of stars beyond the window. Within the hour, I would be in Caden's bed, fulfilling my part of our bargain. But now the stakes had changed. This wasn't simply about enduring one night to gain freedom. This was about denying or accepting a bond that, if the legends were true, could tie me to this alpha forever. The door to the bathing chamber opened and Caden emerged, wearing only loose linen trousers that rode low on his hips. Water droplets still clung to his chest and shoulders, catching the firelight. Scars mapped his skin. The history of battles fought and won etched permanently into his flesh. "Are you afraid?" he asked, moving to stand beside me before the fire. I considered lying, then thought better of it. "Yes." "Of me or of what you might feel?" The question cut too close to my core. "Both," I admitted. He nodded as though my answer satisfied him. "Honesty. Good." He gestured toward the massive bed. "Shall we begin our night?" All of Riverist. The moment had arrived. My heart pounded so loudly I was certain he could hear it. One night to endure, one night to resist the pull I already felt toward this alpha who claimed to be my fated match. One night to secure my freedom or surrender it forever. I moved toward the bed, each step feeling like a choice between two destinies. Behind me, I felt rather than heard Caden follow a predator patient in his pursuit, confident that his prey had nowhere to run that he couldn't follow. As I reached the edge of the bed, his voice came low and intimate near my ear. "Remember, little Omega. If you endure until dawn, you're free." But first, his fingers brushed the hair from my neck, sending shivers cascading down my spine. "Let's see what you're made of." His touch lingered at the nape of my neck, a ghost of pressure that made my pulse race. I stood frozen, caught between the instinct to flee and the inexplicable urge to lean into his warmth. "Turn around," Caden commanded softly. I obeyed, though not from submission. I needed to see his face, to read the intentions behind those amber-flecked eyes. He stood close, too close. His bare chest rising and falling with each measured breath. The scars I'd glimpsed earlier told stories of violence, of battles survived, of pain endured. Without thinking, I raised my hand toward a particularly jagged mark that ran from his collarbone to his ribs. He caught my wrist before I made contact. His grip firm but not painful. "Curious little moon speaker," he murmured. "Always reaching for what others feared to touch. How did you get this one?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Something dark passed over his features. An assassination attempt 3 years ago. The would-be killer believed an Omega's blade would be too insignificant for an Alpha to detect until too late. Was he right? She, he corrected, was nearly right. I survived only because the poison on her blade was diluted. His thumb traced circles on the inside of my wrist, sending tendrils of heat up my arm. Since then, I've learned to trust no one's submission at face value. The implication hung between us that my resistance, my refusal to cower, was precisely what had drawn him to me in that hall of perfumed, well-trained Omegas. "Is that why you offered me this bargain?" I asked. "Because you don't trust submission given too easily." His lips curved into a smile that transformed his face, softening the hard edges of power into something almost boyish. "I offered because you looked ready to bite the handler who dared touch you without permission. Because your eyes held defiance even as your body trembled with fear." His hand slid from my wrist to my waist, resting at the curve where the robe cinched. "Because true mates should come together as equals, not as conqueror and conquered." "We're not true mates," I insisted, though the words felt hollow even to my own ears. "Then this night will prove it one way or another," he replied, his confidence unwavering. His fingers found the knot securing my robe. "May I?" The question startled me. Alphas didn't ask permission. They took. Especially Alpha Kings with Omegas already in their chambers, already committed to a night in their beds. "Yes," I whispered. Uncertainty and something darker, more primal, wearing within me. He untied the knot with deliberate slowness, his gaze never leaving mine as the robe fell open. Cool air kissed my skin, raising goosebumps across my exposed flesh. I resisted the urge to cover myself, standing naked before him, with only my grandmother's pendant resting between my breasts. Caden's eyes darkened as they traveled over me, his breathing becoming more ragged. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice rough with restraint. "Like moonlight given form." Heat bloomed across my skin, spreading from my cheeks down my neck and chest. No one had ever looked at me this way, as though I were precious, desirable, worth savoring. "Your turn," I said, surprising myself with my boldness. His eyebrows raised slightly, but he complied, untying the drawstring of his linen pants and letting them fall. He stood before me, magnificent and unashamed, every inch the Alpha King. My breath caught in my throat at the sight of him, at the raw power contained in the body now revealed to me. "Satisfied?" he asked, amusement tinging his voice. "Intimidated," I admitted honestly. His laugh was unexpected and genuine. "Honesty again, you continued to surprise me." He reached for me, his hands settling on my waist. "We have all night. There's no rush." He guided me onto the bed, the fur soft against my bare skin. I expected him to cover me with his body immediately to claim what I had tacitly offered by agreeing to his bargain. Instead, he stretched out beside me, propped on one elbow, his free hand hovering just above my collarbone. "May I touch you?" he asked again, his restraint evident in the tension of his muscles. I nodded, not trusting my voice. His fingers traced a path from my collarbone to my shoulder, then down my arm, as though mapping every inch of me. "When I scented you in that hall," he said, his voice low and intimate. "It was like finding something I didn't know I'd lost. Like coming home after a lifetime of wandering." "That's just alpha instinct," I argued weakly. "The drive to claim." He shook his head, his hand continuing its gentle exploration across my stomach, careful to avoid my breasts and the more intimate places that already act for his touch. "I've been surrounded by omegas since I took the throne. Beautiful ones, willing ones, trained ones. None of them affected me like this." His scent was everywhere now, wrapping around me like a physical embrace. Pine and smoke and male arousal, making my head swim and my body respond in ways I couldn't control. My omega nature, so carefully suppressed for years, surged toward his alpha presence, recognizing something my mind still fought to deny. "What if this is just physical?" I whispered. "Just bodies responding to bodies." Cadence's hand paused at my hip. "Then why can I sense your thoughts before you speak them? Why did I know to bring you blue robes when I've never seen you wear them? Why does every instinct I possess scream that you belong with me, beside me, under me?" His words sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. "Because you're an Alpha King, used to getting what you want. Because we're fated," he countered, leaning closer until his lips hovered just above mine. "Tell me you don't feel it too, Aurora. Lie to me if you can." I couldn't lie. Not when his proximity made my skin burn with need. Not when his scent clouded my thoughts. Not when everything within me strained toward him like a flower seeking sun. Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss born of curiosity as much as desire. For one heartbeat, he remained still, as though shocked by my initiative. Then he responded with a hunger that stole my breath, his hand sliding into my hair to cradle my head as he deepened the kiss. The touch of his lips against mine sent electricity racing through my body, igniting a fire that consumed rational thought. I moaned against his mouth, my hands finding purchase on his shoulders, nails digging into skin as I pulled him closer. He broke the kiss, both of us gasping for air. "Do you believe me now?" he asked, his voice strained with the effort of restraint. "I believe there's something between us," I admitted. "Whether it's fate or chemistry, I don't know." He smiled, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes. "Then let me convince you." His mouth found mine again, more demanding this time as his body shifted to cover mine. The weight of him pressing me into the furs felt right in a way I couldn't explain, as though my body had been designed to receive his. His hands explored me more boldly now, cupping my breast, thumb brushing over the sensitive peak until I arched into his touch with a gasp. "Tell me what you want," he murmured against my throat, where his lips traced a burning path toward my pulse point. Dangerously close to where a claiming bite would mark me as his forever. "I don't know," I whispered truthfully. This terrain was unfamiliar, my body's responses new and overwhelming. "Then let me show you," he replied, his mouth continuing its journey downward. What followed was a slow, exquisite education in pleasure. Caden's hands and mouth discovered places I hadn't known could bring such sensation, drawing sounds from me I'd never made before. Each touch, each kiss seemed designed to break down my resistance to prove the connection between us transcended the physical. And it was working. When his fingers finally slipped between my thighs, finding the slick evidence of my desire, I cried out, my body jerking at the intensity of sensation. So responsive, he murmured against my breast where his mouth had been teasing the sensitive peak. So perfect for me. Caden, I gasped as his fingers moved with deliberate skill, building a pressure within me that threatened to shatter my composure entirely. Say it again, he commanded, his eyes finding mine in the firelight. Say my name. Caden, I repeated, my voice breaking as his touch brought me closer to some precipice I'd never approached before. Something primal flashed in his expression. Mine, he growled, his control slipping for the first time. Say it, Alara. Tell me you're mine. The demand cut through the haze of pleasure, reminding me of what was at stake. Freedom versus submission, independence versus belonging, my village's safety versus my own autonomy. I turned my face away, unable to give him what he wanted. Even as my body betrayed me, responding to his every touch as though made for him. He didn't force the issue, didn't demand the acknowledgement again. Instead, his movements became more deliberate, more focused, driving me toward a peak I couldn't resist. When it crashed over me, wave after wave of blinding pleasure. I cried out his name again, my body convulsing beneath his skilled touch. As I lay gasping, trembling in the aftermath, he kissed me gently, giving me a moment to recover, but I could feel his restraint in the tension of his muscles. In the hardness pressed against my thigh. The night is young, he whispered against my ear. And I'm far from finished with you. Little moon speaker. What followed blurred into a tapestry of sensation and emotion. Caden was by turns gentle and demanding, tender and possessive. He brought me to that peak again and again until I was boneless and pliant beneath him. Only then, when I was mindless with pleasure, did he position himself between my thighs, the question in his eyes requiring no words. I nodded, beyond resistance, beyond denial of what my body and perhaps my heart already knew. He entered me slowly, giving me time to adjust to the intrusion. His eyes never leaving mine as he claimed me in the most fundamental way. The discomfort was brief, overwhelmed by the sense of rightness, of completion I felt with him inside me. Caden, I breathed, my hands clutching at his back as he began to move. My Arya, he responded, his voice raw with emotion I hadn't expected from the powerful Alpha King. My mate, I didn't contradict him this time. Couldn't. When every thrust seemed to bind us more tightly together. When his scent and mine blended into something new. When the pleasure building between us felt too profound to be merely physical. Our bodies moved together as though we'd done this 1,000 times before, finding a rhythm that built steadily towards something greater than the peaks I'd already experienced. Caden's control began to slip, his movements becoming more urgent, more primal. His mouth found my neck, teeth grazing the sensitive skin where a claiming bite would mark me as his forever. Fear and desire welled within me. No! I gasped, even as my body arched toward his mouth. You promised. No claiming. He groaned against my skin. The sound almost pained, but lifted his head, pressing his forehead to mine instead. I know what I promised, he gritted out. But gods, Arya, you're making it difficult to remember why. The honesty and his struggle touched something within me. This powerful alpha, this king who could take whatever he wanted, was fighting his most basic instincts to honor his word to me. Our pace quickened, the pleasure spiraling higher, tighter, until I felt myself balanced on the edge of something monumental. Let go, Caden urged, his voice strained with his own approaching release. Let go for me, Arya, I did, shattering around him with a cry that might have been his name. Might have been a prayer. He followed immediately, his powerful body tensing above me as he found his own completion. My name a benediction on his lips. Afterward, we lay tangled together, sweat cooling on our skin, heartbeats gradually slowing. Cadence's weight pressed me into the furs, but I made no move to dislodge him, finding comfort in the solid reality of him. Do you believe me now? He asked finally, his voice soft in the quiet chamber. I didn't answer immediately, taking inventory of my body, my emotions. What had happened between us transcended physical pleasure. That much I couldn't deny. But did it mean we were fated? Did it mean I should surrender my hard-won independence to become his queen, his mate, his? I believe there's something powerful between us, I admitted carefully. But I need time to understand what it means. He rolled to his side, taking his weight off me. But keeping me close, one arm draped possessively across my waist. Dawn is still hours away, he reminded me. You don't have to decide anything yet. I traced the line of his jaw with my finger, studying the face that had seemed so cold and impassive in the great hall, now softened by satiation and something that looked dangerously like tenderness. Tell me about your mother, I said, the question appearing in my mind from nowhere. Surprise flickered across his features. My mother? Was she like me? A moon speaker-acre? Understanding dawned in his eyes. Ah, no. But she knew of them. She was the one who taught me the old stories, the old ways. Before politics and power reduced omegas to commodities and alphas to tyrants. His finger traced idle patterns on my bare hip. She would have liked you. Would have. Pain shadowed his expression. She died when I was 14, the same night my father was assassinated. The pieces began to align in my mind. His distrust of easy submission, his scars, the weight he carried as a king who had ascended the throne too young. I'm sorry, I said simply. He nodded acknowledgement, then asked. And your parents? You mentioned your grandmother, but not them. Fever took them both the same winter, 10 years ago, I answered. The old grief a dull ache now. My grandmother raised me after. Taught me what she could of her gifts before she passed 3 years ago. Leaving you alone, unprotected. I bristled slightly at the implication. I protected myself. I learned to live with the whispers, the fear, the isolation. His eyes softened. I didn't mean to imply weakness, quite the opposite. You survived when others would have broken. His hand moved to cut my cheek. It's one of the many reasons you're worthy to be my queen. The declaration startled me back to reality, to the stakes of our bargain. I haven't agreed to that. Not yet, he conceded, confidence undiminished. But the night is only half over. Before I could form a retort, his mouth claimed mine again, and rational thought fled once more under the onslaught of sensation. As his hands renewed their exploration of my body, already familiar with what brought me pleasure, I wondered if I was fighting a battle already lost, if Dawn would find me not only physically conquered, but willingly surrendered to this alpha who promised not subjugation, but partnership. And for the first time, the prospect didn't fill me with dread, but with a dangerous, seductive hope. Dawn's first pale light filtered through the high windows, painting the chamber in soft grays and blues. I lay awake, watching shadows retreat from Caden's sleeping face. In repose, the Alpha King looked younger, the lines of authority smoothed away, his dark lashes casting delicate shadows on his cheeks. One arm remained possessively draped across my waist, even in sleep, unwilling to let me go. The night had been a revelation. After our second joining, we had talked for hours about his kingdom, about my village, about the spirits I could see, and the legends he had been taught. Then passion had overtaken us again, and again after that, until exhaustion finally claimed us both. Now, as morning light heralded the end of our bargain, I faced the choice I had been avoiding through the long pleasure-filled night. Stay or go. Claim my freedom as promised or surrender to the bond that had grown undeniable between us. I slipped carefully from beneath his arm, gathering the blue robe from where it had fallen beside the bed. My body acted pleasantly, bearing the evidence of his attention in small bruises and tender places. As I secured the robe around me, I moved to the window, gazing out at the fortress walls and beyond them. The distant smudge of forest that eventually led to Rivermist, home, or at least the closest thing to home I had known. But what awaited me there? Suspicion, isolation. The council's anger when they discovered their plan to insult the Alpha King had backfired. I would return no more welcome than when I left. Perhaps even less so. Yet it would be freedom. Freedom I had earned through the night just past. Freedom to choose my own path. Beholden to no Alpha, no matter how compelling. You're still here. Cadence's voice, rough with sleep, startled me from my thoughts. I turned to find him sitting up. The furs pulled at his waist. His eyes intent upon me. Dawn has just broken, I replied, gesturing to the window. Our bargain is complete. I endured the night. So you did. His expression remained carefully neutral, but I sensed the tension beneath his calm exterior, and more than endured, I think. Heat rose to my cheeks at the memory of how enthusiastically I had participated in our final coupling, how I had taken the initiative, explored his body with the same thorough as he had shown mine. The bargain stands, he continued when I didn't respond. You're free to return to Rivermist with my protection guaranteed for your village. I studied him, trying to reconcile this honorable man with the cold, imposing figure who had selected me from the line of Omegas. Just like that, after everything you said about fated mates. About the pain of separation, something flashed in his eyes. Pain perhaps, or resignation. I keep my word, Arya, always. He rose from the bed, magnificent in his nakedness, and reached for his discarded trousers. I'll have guards escort you home. You'll want to leave before the court awakens and begins its gossip. As he dressed, I remained by the window, conflicted. He was giving me exactly what I had wanted, what I had agreed to this arrangement for, freedom. Yet the prospect of walking away from him, of never again feeling his touch or seeing his rare, transformative smile, created an ache in my chest I hadn't anticipated. What if I stayed? The question escaped before I could reconsider it. Caden went still, his back to me as he fastened his trousers. Don't toy with me, little Omega, he said, his voice dangerously soft. Not about this. I'm not toying, I replied, taking a step toward him. I'm asking what would happen if I chose to stay. He turned slowly, his expression guarded, but his eyes burning with something I recognize now as hope. If you stayed, you would be my queen, my mate, my equal in all things. Equal? I repeated skeptically. An Omega as equal to the Alpha King. The court would never accept it. The court would have no choice. He closed the distance between us, his hands coming to rest lightly on my shoulders. But I won't lie to you, Alara. It wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, challenges to your authority, perhaps even danger, like the Omega assassin who gave you that scar. His lips curved into a grim smile. Precisely like that. There are those who believe Omegas should remain possessions, not partners. They would see you as a threat to the natural order. I considered this, weighing the danger against the promise of belonging, of purpose beyond mere survival. And what of my gifts, the visions, the spirits? The moon speakers of old were advisors to kings, bridges between the physical world and the realm of spirit, Caden said, his thumbs tracing small circles on my collarbone. Your gifts would be honored. Not hidden. Used for the benefit of the kingdom, not feared as witchcraft. The prospect was seductive, to be valued for the very thing that had made me an outcast. To use my strange abilities openly instead of in secret. And us, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What would become of us beyond politics and position? Something softened in his gaze. We would be what we are meant to be, partners, lovers. His hand moved to rest against my stomach, the gesture unexpectedly intimate. Eventually parents to heirs who might carry both our strengths. The image his words conjured, children with his strength in my sight, raised not in fear but in pride, sent an unexpected yearning through me. Children had seemed an impossibility in Rivermist, where no man would court the strange Omega who spoke to empty air. I don't know how to be a queen, I admitted, voicing the fear that lurked beneath the others. And I didn't know how to be a king when my father's crown was placed on my head. Caden replied, we learn. We adapt. We grow into the roles fate assigns us. His hands moved to cut my face. But know this, era of Rivermist. I want you for far more than your title or your womb or even your gifts. I want you for the fire that burns within you. The courage that made you meet my gaze when others cowered. The honesty that refuses flattery or false submission. His words wrapped around my heart, squeezing until it was difficult to breathe. This was what I had never expected to find. Not just desire or protection, but recognition. To be seen, truly seen for all that I was. I'm afraid, I confessed, leaning into his touch despite myself. Of what? Of losing myself. Of becoming just an extension of you, your power, your will. I swallowed hard. I fought too hard for my independence to surrender it. Even for this connection between us, understanding dawned in his eyes. You think accepting the mate bond means surrendering yourself. Doesn't it? Isn't that what being claimed means? Becoming property, an extension of your alpha's will? Caden shook his head, his expression turning fierce. Not between true mates, never between us. His hand slid down to grasp mine. Come with me. There's something you should see. Curious despite my uncertainty, I allowed him to lead me to a heavy wooden door on the far side of the chamber. It opened to reveal not another room, but a narrow spiral staircase carved into stone. Where does this lead? I asked as he took a lamp from the wall. To the reason I believe we're fated, he replied cryptically, guiding me up the winding steps. We climbed in silence. The narrow passage forcing us to proceed single file. After what felt like hundreds of steps, we emerged into a circular chamber at the top of a tower. Unlike the opulent royal quarters below, this room was austere, its stone walls bare, save for shelves lined with ancient-looking books and scrolls. In the center stood a pedestal bearing a single object, a crystal orb the size of 2 fists, cloudy within, as though filled with swirling mist. "What is this place?" I whispered, sensing power humming in the air, making the hairs on my arms rise. "The seer's chamber," Cadden answered, placing the lamp on a nearby table. "It has existed since the castle was built centuries ago. According to legend, it was designed by the first Alpha King and his mate, a moon speaker like you." I approached the pedestal slowly, drawn by the orb's subtle pulsing energy. "And this, the Heart of Sight, a relic from the time when Alphas and Omegas ruled as equals before power corrupted the balance." He stood beside me, watching my reaction carefully. "It responds only to those with the gift of true sight." The moon speakers as if responding to his words. The mist within the crystal began to swirl more rapidly. Colors bleeding into the grayness. Blues, silvers, hints of gold. "It's reacting to you," Cadden said softly. "In 3 generations of my family, it has never responded like this." I stared at the orb, transfixed by the patterns forming and dissolving within. "What does it do?" "According to the old texts, it amplifies the moon speaker's gifts. Allows them to see more clearly, to reach farther into the realm of spirit, to guide the kingdom through threats visible and invisible." His voice lowered. "It said that when touched by fated mates, one an alpha of royal blood, one a moon speaker, it reveals the path ahead." The implication was clear. "You want us to touch it together?" He nodded, his expression solemn. "If nothing happens, you can walk away knowing our connection was just physical attraction, powerful, but ultimately mundane. But if it responds..." He left the possibility open. I hesitated, weighing the choice before me. If I touched the orb and nothing happened, I could leave with certainty, free of doubts. But if it confirmed what Cadden believed, that we were truly fated, could I still walk away? What if I still choose to leave even if it shows we're fated? I asked, needing to understand the full terms of this new bargain. Pain crossed his features, quickly masked. "Then I would honor your choice as promised. But I would hope you might consider an alternative. Not immediate claiming, but courtship. Time to know each other beyond a single night of passion. Time for you to see that being my mate would not mean losing yourself, but finding a partner who values all that you are." His offer was unexpected, a concession I hadn't thought an Alpha King capable of making. Not immediate submission, but choice. Not possession, but partnership. "Very well," I agreed, my heart racing. "Well, touch it together." Cadden positioned himself opposite me, the pedestal between us. "Place your hand on it when you're ready," he instructed. "I'll do the same." And taking a deep breath, I reached out, my fingers hovering just above the crystal surface. Across from me, Cadden mirrored my position, his eyes never leaving mine. In them, I saw not the commanding Alpha King, but a man offering vulnerability, hope, and the possibility of rejection. Together, I whispered and pressed my palm to the cool crystal. As he did the same, light exploded from the orb, so bright I had to close my eyes against its intensity. Behind my eyelids, visions cascaded in rapid succession. Cadden and I standing before a gathered court, his hand steady in mine. The two of us bent over ancient texts, searching for answers to some unseen threat. My body swollen with child, his hands protective around the curve of new life. The two of us aged, silver in our hair, surrounded by children and grandchildren who bore the marks of both our bloodlines. And through it all, a sense of rightness, of completion I had never known. Not submission or dominance, but balance. Two halves of a whole, each supporting the other's strengths, each protecting the other's vulnerabilities. When the light faded and I could open my eyes again, I found Cadden staring at me with wonder, with hope, with a vulnerability I had never expected to see in the Alpha King. "Did you see?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The visions had been clear, unmistakable. We were indeed fated, not in the simplistic way of children's tales, where an Omega submits and an Alpha possesses, but in the ancient way, where two souls find in each other the missing pieces of themselves. "I can't be a traditional Omega queen," I said finally, finding my voice. "I won't be silent or submissive or merely decorative." "I would never ask that of you," he replied. His hands still on the orb, still connected to mine through the crystal between us. "I need a partner, Arya, not a possession. Someone who will challenge me when I'm wrong, support me when I'm right, and stand beside me as we face whatever comes." There will be opposition, I warned, from your court, from traditionalists who believe Omegas should know their place. His smile turned predatory, reminding me that for all his gentleness with me, he was still the Alpha King, a man who had fought and killed to protect his throne. His people. Let them oppose us. Together, we'll show them what true balance looks like, what the kingdom can become when old wisdom meets new strength. The pendant at my throat seemed suddenly warm, as though my grandmother approved of this path, this choice. I remembered her final words to me. Your heart is the one thing they cannot take unless you surrender it. But surrender implied defeat, loss. What I felt looking at Caden now wasn't defeat. It was recognition. Not loss, but finding. I won't return to River Mist. I decided. The words feeling right as they left my lips. Not permanently, but I would like to visit, to collect my few possessions, to explain to those who showed me kindness. Hope blazed in Caden's eyes. You'll stay. You'll be my mate, my queen. I'll stay, I confirmed. Not because you've conquered me or claimed me, but because I choose this path, choose you. With open eyes, he came around the pedestal then, gathering me in his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. My AR murmured against my hair. My moon speaker, my queen. I leaned into his embrace, feeling for the first time the rightness of belonging without the fear of losing myself. My Caden, I replied, lifting my face to his. My king, my mate. When his lips met mine, it was a sealing of promises, a beginning rather than an ending. I had entered his chamber as a sacrifice, expecting to endure a night of submission to secure my freedom. Instead, I had found a partnership I never dreamed possible. A future where my strangeness was not a curse but a gift. Where the very things that had made me an outcast made me invaluable. Later, as we descended the spiral staircase hand in hand, I glanced back at the crystal orb, now glowing softly in the morning light. It had shown me not just visions of a shared future, but the truth I had been fighting since Caden first looked at me in that great hall. That sometimes freedom isn't found in isolation or independence, but in the courage to trust another soul with your heart. What are you thinking? Caden asked as we reached the bottom of the stairs. I smiled up at him, no longer afraid of what lay ahead. That I didn't just endure the night in your bed, Alpha King. I found my destiny there. His answering smile was like the sun breaking through clouds, transforming his face from handsome to breathtaking. And I found mine in the Omega who dared to meet my gaze when all others looked away. He lifted my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. Welcome home, my queen. Home. Not a place, but a person. Not a surrender, but a choice. As Caden led me back toward the royal chambers, where we would begin the work of transforming an ancient kingdom, I felt my grandmother's pendant warm against my skin, a reminder of where I had come from, and a blessing for where I was going. The night I had agreed to endure had ended, but the life I had chosen was just beginning. And for the first time in my memory, I was not afraid of what the future held. Because whatever came, we would face it together. Alpha and Omega, king and queen, fated mates, bound not by force or tradition, but by choice and recognition of the soul that completed our